taken to a nowhere land. Andersonville, what's your plan? Talk to me, tell me you.
Well, today we're headed to probably one of my favorite Civil War related sites, which is the infamous prison camp of Andersonville, located here in southwestern Georgia. Now, usually I have a whole group of students, falling behind me here at Andersonville, because I usually bring them up here like every spring. So it'd be kind of nice not having a group of like 30 or 40 people like falling behind me. Not that I don't love them, I love them dearly, but without them here and being alone, I'm actually able to sort of, take my time at the site. So behind me here, you will see the remains of Andersonville, or at least the site where it used to be. Now, 150 years ago at this time, this whole area here that you see would have been just a mass of men struggling to survive. Now, whenever this thing was originally built in 1864, it was originally supposed to only house about 10,000 men, but the numbers kept growing and growing and growing to the point that they maxed out at over 40,000 at any one time. Now, of that number, over 13,000 ended up losing their lives. And I should also say women, because it is recorded that there were about 3 women that ended up being here. And one of them, strangely enough, even gave birth here. Now, I don't know how you're supposed to pop out a child in these conditions, but apparently this woman did so. Whenever I come to this location, I always pause and reflect here, because I think about what the men must have felt like as they were approaching this gate, because they could hear the noises that were inside. There are most likely like dogs barking around here. There's probably lots of yelling going on, and also the stench. They could also get like the smell of Andersonville too. So approaching these gates was probably one of the most frightening things they ever experienced in their lives. Once they got into this holding portion of the prison gate, they were told the rules about the camp. Now, one of the major rules was about the deadline. Now, the deadline, it was like an extra source of protection, against escape. And it extended about, 5 to 10 feet outside. I'll probably get the figures wrong, but extended outside the stockade wall. And if you crossed the deadline, you were told that you could be automatically shot. Well, once prisoners got inside the stockade fence, they were basically left to their own devices. They had to survive on their own, and a lot of them really didn't have anything with them. If they did have something with them, they were at a major advantage, because then they could trade for other goods. But even having these items didn't really guarantee anything, because oftentimes they would have everything stolen away from them once they entered the camp. There was this thieving group known as the Raiders that were basically making life miserable for everybody inside, and they were stealing everybody's belongings. They were stealing their food, clothing, everything they could get their hands on. Things ended up getting so bad that the prisoners actually approached Captain Wirtz to see if they could put these guys on trial, which they ended up doing. They had a trial held inside the prison gates here, and they ended up sentencing 6 of them to death. Now, right here is a representation of kind of what they were given to eat. This is about a half pint of cornmeal with a little bit of molasses. If they were lucky, they could get some stock peas in it. On other occasions, they might even get some rancid meat. But this is not enough for a human being to survive on. So I thought, in the spirit of solidarity, I would actually give a try for some Andersonville food. And so like I said, cornmeal mixed with a little bit of molasses, that was sort of something. I'm sure they added water to it too. Wait, let me get some water. They had to have added water to it. And of course, this is actually sort of authentic, because all the bugs that are around me, they're really attracted to it. So I'm probably getting some little bit of protein in here because of those bugs. Actually, there's one right there. Gross. Okay, so let's give it a try. Oh, holy crap. Yeah, I probably would have starved to death. So some of them ended up playing games. There was a popular game playing with their own body lice, in which they would reach into their shirt or something, and they would play how many, and then they'd open up their hand, and then they'd count how many lice were scattered around, and whoever got the guessed the closest to the amount won some sort of prize, or at least bragging rights. The reason why Andersonville was placed here, or we can also call it Camp Sumter, that was the official name. But the reason why it's placed here is based upon two different reasons. The first of which is because it's basically out in the middle of nowhere. It was in a very remote section of southwestern Georgia, and even today, it's like friggin' out in the middle of nowhere. Now, no offense to you people in America, y'all are great, but seriously, y'all are out in the boondocks. Second reason why it was located here is because of this right here. There's a creek that ran right through the middle of the camp, and this is supposed to provide the fresh drinking water for all the prisoners. Now, do you all really think that this can provide enough fresh drinking water for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people? I don't think so. Even though this was supposed to be their water source, by the time it actually reached the prisoners, it was already heavily contaminated because the Confederates had been throwing their trash in it upstream. Well, this is about as far as we're going to descend into the creek bed because of that right there. I'm not going to risk running into a snake because that is seriously one of my greatest fears in life.
There ain't no snakes out here right now.
There better not be. Don't want to see that snake right there. Oh crap, oh crap. There's a snake, there's a snake.
Just a little one.
I don't care. Now, this area behind me might just look like an empty field to you, but 150 years ago, it was actually the site of the prison hospital. And they would bring men up here to this 5-acre tract of land and basically just leave them exposed to the air. Now, as far as the medical treatment they were getting, really nothing was going on. They were basically being robbed of their belongings when they were here, but there were lots of men that ended up, living their last moments right on this location here. And you want to know what the #1 cause of death was? Diarrhea. Yeah, they didn't have Pepto-Bismol back then. Now, the lack of medical supplies here was pretty atrocious. Like, the only thing that they could really do for the men, besides just letting them lay here and rot, was sometimes they would, open wounds. They would sit there and they'd pour water on the open wounds and hope that that would do the trick. Well, there are a lot of really bad stories here in Andersonville, a lot of suffering, but there's actually a couple positive stories that came out of it. One of them was situated very close to this site here. Naturally, one of the things that they desperately needed here in Andersonville was fresh drinking water because the creek that was provided to them did really nothing except to make them sick. In August of that year, there came some rains, and the story goes is that there was this intense, massive storm cloud that was approaching. It was so awe-inspiring that the men inside the camp actually just stopped and stared. For a lot of people, they said this is the only time that it went completely quiet in Andersonville. Now, as this storm cloud was approaching, it was darkening everything. All of a sudden, there was this massive bolt of lightning that came out of the sky and struck right around this location. And out of that, whenever it hit the ground, there was this natural spring that just automatically opened up and actually sent like a geyser into the air. Unfortunately, the fresh water that sprang up was from inside the deadline, and we all know that that was a big no-no to trudge over there. So men ended up using sticks and tying like a cup to it and then fishing it over there to get their fresh water. But later on, the prison guards actually allowed the men to freely go over there to get fresh water and then go back across the deadline. As a result of this natural spring opening up, it probably saved thousands of lives. One cool thing they've done here on the site is that they've reconstructed a portion of Andersonville just to give visitors sort of a perspective of what the conditions were actually like here. Of course, it's literally impossible to recreate the entire feeling here because we'll never know what these men actually went through, but at least they've got some sort of visual for visitors to take in. This was an open air prison, so there wasn't any shelter that was provided. Whatever men were able to bring in, what they're able to build themselves, that's what they did. And so this is like a representation of something that somebody might have built. You also notice something right there at the bottom there. That's a capstone that represents probably where a well was dug or either a tunnel was dug. Well, with the massive amount of deaths here at Andersonville, we needed a place to bury them. So they established a cemetery about a quarter of a mile away. And so this is just a small representation of the 13,000 that are buried here. The rest are kind of scattered throughout. You'll notice that the graves are very, very close together. And that's the reason for that is because they were not buried in a casket. They were all buried like basically shoulder to shoulder, almost like a trench. Strangely enough, the most visited graves here in the cemetery are actually the Raiders' graves, which are right there. And you'll notice that they are separated from everybody else because that was meant to be sort of a sign of disrespect. Basically, they didn't, deserve to be with the rest of the soldiers that they abused and used for so long. Well, that about does it for me from Andersonville. I thank you all for watching, and I encourage everybody, if you're interested, to come out to the actual site yourself. There's only so much that you can learn from a video, even though I produce great ones, but there's only so much I can share. So I think the best way to actually see and experience the site is to be there on, on the physical property itself, because there's just so much more to learn. But if you enjoyed the video, please like it. Check out my other videos both on YouTube and on my website at oneifylandadventures.com. And so, time for me to hit the road yet again.
Taken to a nowhere land, Andersonville, what's your plan? Talk to me, tell me you sent me